There was a time when the best drivers weren't the ones who followed the rules, they were the ones who outsmarted them. In 1980s Britain, trucking was half work, half chess match against the law. The paperwork, the limits, the inspectors, all things that slowed down men who only wanted to get the job done, so they learned to play the game differently. They bent the rules, dodged the eyes watching, and made the system work for them. 15 tricks stood above the rest, clever, risky, and pure old school. The first and most famous was the tachograph dodge. Every driver knew the 9-hour limit was a fantasy. So the trick was simple: fool the clock. Some pulled the fuse to stop it spinning. Others carried 2 charts under different names. A few taped magnets to the back to freeze the needle in place while the miles kept rolling. It was part art, part science. When inspectors checked, the record said resting. The driver knew otherwise. He'd just crossed half the country. Next came the weighbridge shuffle. You knew exactly where the ministry inspectors parked, and you knew the side roads they never touched. When a bridge check was announced over the CB, the smart drivers slipped off early, took the back lanes, and rejoined a few miles later looking legal. Some even carried dummy loads, crates filled with straw or timber, to swap with heavier cargo later in the trip. If they did have to cross a bridge, they'd dump a bit of load nearby, collect it after. It was teamwork disguised as coincidence. Fuel tricks were another form of survival. Diesel was expensive, and some firms ran on fumes financially. Drivers mixed red diesel, heating oil, or whatever they could find to stretch the tank. A few even rigged double fuel lines, one legal, one not. If the inspectors dipped the tank, they saw clean fuel. Flip the valve and the cheap stuff ran again. It wasn't greed, it was survival. The road didn't pay for itself. One clever move many swore by was the logbook rewrite. Before digital tracking, proof came down to handwriting. Delivery times, miles driven, rest breaks, all adjusted at the cafe table with a strong tea and a borrowed pen. You learned the inspector's habits. Round numbers looked fake, neat pages looked suspicious, so you made your lies messy. The best drivers made it look natural, like it had been scribbled mid-rainstorm at the side of the M6. Then there was the police spotter network. Drivers used CB radios to track patrols, inspectors, and roadblocks. Blue light at junction 12 meant take the next exit. The bears in the woods meant lay low. Within minutes, word spread across counties. Before radar detectors and apps, this was the original crowdsourced warning system, fast, loyal, and almost never wrong. Another favorite was the overnight lay-by swap. To dodge parking bans or delivery curfews, drivers parked miles away, swapped loads between lorries under the dark, then rolled in fresh at sunrise. If one truck was too overweight or out of hours, another took the paperwork and the risk. It was teamwork built on trust and a bit of nerve. Authorities saw one driver clocking in legally while another got some shut-eye in peace. Creative paperwork was its own skill. Delivery notes went missing, invoices were lost in the post, and custom slips were conveniently dated wrong. Drivers learned which stamps mattered and which didn't. If a border guard wanted proof, you smiled, handed him a pile, and let him drown in the confusion. Half of trucking in that era was performance art with pens, and then there was the time-saving trick at depots. Officially, you waited your turn. Unofficially, a crate of beer or a pack of cigarettes could move your name to the top of the list. It wasn't corruption, it was courtesy. Everyone was working long hours, everyone was tired, and sometimes small kindnesses made big differences. The load moved faster, the driver got home sooner, and nobody filed a complaint. The 1980s road ran on more than fuel. It ran on cunning. The best drivers weren't rule breakers for the thrill of it. They were problem solvers in overalls. They knew how to play the system without breaking it completely. Every shortcut, every sidestep, every little trick was born from pressure. Pressure to deliver, to survive, and to keep the country running. The tricks didn't stop at weighbridges or logbooks. The longer you'd been on the road, the more you learned how to bend it without snapping it. Every haul taught something new: how to deal with delays, how to outsmart depot managers, and how to keep a paycheck when the odds were stacked against you. The 1980s turned British truckers into master tacticians long before anyone called it that. One classic was the double delivery game. You'd make one official drop and one quiet one. If a customer was short on stock and desperate, they'd pay cash to get it early. The paperwork would say delayed due to routing, but everyone got what they needed. Sometimes the boss even knew. As long as he got his cut, It was risky, but when you were driving 12 hours for 50 quid, a side job kept the tank full and the kids fed. Then came the border bluff. When crossing into Europe, customs could hold you for hours over missing paperwork or tight regulations. Clever drivers carried spares, extra forms, duplicate stamps, even blank manifests that could be filled out on the fly. A smudge of coffee and a tired look sold the story every time. Most officers just waved you through rather than deal with the mess. It wasn't dishonesty, it was efficiency in its rawest form. Another favorite was the cold start trick. Old diesels hated winter mornings. Instead of waiting for the engine to warm properly, drivers lit small fires under the sump, real flames flickering under 40 tons of metal. It worked most of the time. The danger was obvious, but when it was -5, you did what you had to do. Some used burning rags, others camping stoves. One or two just poured a splash of diesel and prayed. Safety inspectors today would faint at the thought. Skipping the tacho calibration was another old trick. You were supposed to have the tachograph checked every few months to make sure it recorded hours accurately. But why bother when an off clock gave you breathing room? Some set them slow, others fast, depending on what suited the job. It wasn't about cheating, it was about control. You decided when you'd driven enough, not a spinning disc. Then there was the fuel float. It sounds innocent, but it was genius. Drivers filled up with company money, then siphoned a bit off for personal use or to sell cheap to other truckers. A few gallons here and there went unnoticed, until it didn't. Some ran their cars entirely on company diesel. When bosses caught on, they started marking fuel with dyes. Drivers found filters that removed the color. It was a constant chess match between man and management. License swaps were another piece of quiet rebellion. When points stacked up and bans loomed, mates stepped in. You drive it for a week, I'll cover your paperwork. It wasn't legal, but it was loyalty. Everyone looked after each other because no one else would. If a driver lost his license, he lost everything, so they shared the risk. Today, with cameras everywhere, it's impossible. Back then, it was brotherhood in motion. And the last clever move was the cafe diversion. When transport bosses called depots asking for updates, office clerks would cover by saying, "He's just unloading." Meanwhile, the driver was miles away in a cafe, tucking into beans on toast and a mug of builder's tea. Everyone knew it, but no one said a word. The work got done, the driver got a breather, and the road kept rolling. These tricks weren't about greed or lawlessness. They were about grit, about men forced to find ways around rules written by people who'd never seen a dawn delivery or fixed a burst airline in the rain. Every cheat had a reason, every risk had a story. They weren't villains, they were survivors. Today's systems are tighter. GPS, digital tachos, cameras on every corner. There's no space left for the old ways. But those who remember the 1980s still smile when they think back. It was a time when cleverness kept the country moving, when a wink and a workaround did more than a stack of regulations ever could. Because back then, trucking wasn't about doing it by the book. It was about knowing which pages you could skip and still get the job done.